Hey guys, and welcome to the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report presented by Great Days Outdoors Magazine, the first podcast to bring you the local inshore, offshore, and onshore fishing report, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. Welcome to the first report of 2021. I'm your host, Butch Theory, and I'm joined today with co-host Captain Patric Garmeson with Ugly Fishing. How we doing today, Cap?
Fantastic, man. Just been a fun day on the water, catching speckled trout, man, and actually pretty nice weather, good conditions.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice day. A little chilly this morning, but it's beautiful right now.
It was a little brisk when I crank that when I crank that Yamaha up and make her eat, man. It gets chilly in a hurry. It was a good morning. Fish bit almost the entire time we were on the water. So
can't beat that. It's hard to argue with there.
Got a good bit to talk about when we get into the inshore.
Good. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the inshore report. I've been missing it, man. I know things have been crazy over the holidays. We got a couple of off weeks. Producer was off for a week, and then we had Christmas and then New Year's, and I feel like I've been jonesing a little bit, man. I hadn't been fishing. I've been in the woods chasing those whitetails, so I'm ready to get my finger back on the pulse and get back on the saltwater train, man.
What's been going on? You been killing anything? What's been up?
We've been doing a little bit of doe management, just trying to get the herd right. But man, it's been weird. It was awesome last weekend as far as temperature and all, but they're just not doing it yet. They should be getting into the rut pretty good right now, and we just haven't seen the deer movement at all. But talking to some people and just kind of figuring out what they're doing, I think it's about to kick off. I think that if you start seeing a bunch of smaller deer, like the fawns, the yearlings from last year, I think the does kind of kick them off before they go into full rut and they get hunkered down. So I think that's what's happening right now. I think this weekend's going to spark off and it's going to get right.
There you go. That's enough about hunting, though.
About to say, there's your whitetail report on top of the fishing report. What you say, Cap?
Let's get into some fishing. Who's bringing the show this week?
This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report is brought to us by Bucks Island. Bucks Island is a family-owned and operated business since 1948. They have new pontoon boats, bass boats, bow riders, and aluminum boats for sale. They love trade-ins for boats and motors. They can rig your boat or ship your new motor anywhere in the United States. They provide boat service on all kinds of boats, even if they weren't purchased from Bucks. They have factory-trained and certified technicians. Visit them at 4500 Highway 77 in Southside, Alabama, 35907, or give them a call at 256-442-2588. And also brought to you by SunSouth. This is the year to do more. And with John Deere equipment from SunSouth, you can do more and save more during the New Year's sales event. Get 0% financing on a great selection of John Deere equipment at SunSouth, like the 1025R and the 3025E tractors with loader, and Gator XUVs like the 835 cab. Never compromise on quality when you go to John Deere. Shop SunSouth during the New Year's sales event. SunSouth, for those that do. Offer expires January 31st, 2021. Some restrictions may apply. See dealer for details. All right, Captain Patric, let's head on down and see what the old Pier Pounder's doing, Mr. David Thornton. All right, Mr. David, welcome back to the show. Tell us a fish story. What's been going on down there? What you been catching and where you been at?
Well, I've been, good thing about living in Mobile is you can pick where you want to fish. And I fished Dauphin Island last week with my grandson and had a great time over there out in front of the old pier. And he even caught just a fantastic catch and photo and release black drum that was almost 36 inches long and weighed almost 26 pounds.
I did see that. That's a giant.
Yeah. So it was his personal best, and he was ecstatic. Of course, he's doing a CPR entry in the Alabama Coastal Fishermen's Association's year-round big fish contest.
Awesome.
That's one of our categories now. So I was really pleased, and he was a quarter inch off the record. So I was, really pleased that it was that big of a fish. It really made an impression on him. And I think after he caught it, he sat in the chair for about 20 minutes, and he didn't want to do anything after that.
Just relish in the moment.
Yeah. He had to needed some recovery time after that one, because it was, those big drum even on medium tackle, he caught it on 15-pound braid and a 10-foot rod, and it just really tired him out. But it takes about a minute per pound, even if you're fishing 20 or 30 pounds, it still takes about a minute per pound to wear those fish down.
I like how you analyze that, David. I've heard you mention that about like the number of minutes per pound of fish, and that's pretty. That you don't think about that on a boat just because there's there's so many different scenarios where you may have a fish that you hook real close to the boat and it doesn't pull a bunch of line. It just makes a couple circles or, but I mean, your fight, the only difference is current and distance from shore. So, it's pretty neat that y'all have kind of isolated that as a time frame on the catch.
Yeah, it's sort of a foot ruler to kind of guesstimate, how big that fish is as to how long it's taken. Yeah.
That's interesting.
And it's, it's not a light drag. We're putting as much pressure as we can. Typically you hook fish like that on a pompano rig or just on a whiting rig. I've even caught them, good size ones like 20, 25 pounds on like 6 or 8 pound line. And it's still about the same thing. It's funny that it takes about the same amount of time to wear them down. And the great thing is they're tough fish. Same with bull reds, and you can wear them down and even get photos, take some measurements and especially this time of year when the water's cool, put them back in the water and they swim away like nothing happened to them.
That's right.
They're great candidates for catching release like that. We also caught some whiting down there. I've been today I was in Orange Beach and that was a lot of fun. The water was calm and getting a little choppy. It was calm early this morning and really chilly, and it started chopping up. And that when the tide changed, that got the fish feeding pretty good. Got into some pompano and whiting, and had a really fun midday session with that. The first 4 hours drew a double zero, didn't even get a bite. And the other fishermen I talked to, same thing. And about 11 o'clock, right at the tide change, when the tide started coming in, those pompanos started running the beaches, and those little slots between the beach and the sandbar where it kind of pinches together a little bit, the kind of places that I talk about in the fishing forecast and stuff like that. Any kind of a pinch point on the beach that gets you to where you can cast to that bar where those waves start breaking is a feeding zone. And they'll, moving from one trough to the next, they have to go through that little neck or that pinch point between the two troughs. And it can often be a really good place if the water's deep enough. That's a big factor right now because the water temperature is a little below 65, I think. The last few nights have been pretty chilly, and it's kind of brought the water temperature back down. It was, we had around New Year's, we had a warm spell, and it kind of got the water temperature back up, but seems like it's dropped again. But the fish are kind of used to it now. It's not the shock that it was before Christmas when we had the freeze, so, but the fish have responded well, but they're kind of in a cold water mode is what I would refer to. That, I've had to kind of change my tactics a little bit, and I'll get into that when we talk about a tip in a little bit. So,
do you mind if I stop you for just a second? You're talking about the pinch points, and some of these areas are kind of small. So give me a scenario. If you were out there and you carried 3 rods out, would you want to put, say, 2 or 3 rods in one small pinch area and really micro focus on an area, or would you want to spread it out and try to find 2 or 3 in a reasonable range and have your rods set at one at each one?
The pinch points are great locations along the beach, and a lot of people, when you're walking down the beach, just overlook them. But what you'll see is the waves off the beach aren't breaking everywhere. Just like sandbars in a river or in the bay, they're not all the same depth. And some of these that are closer to shore, like within, say, 50 yards casting distance, might have a nice little trough behind them that is even 6 or 8 feet deep that connects 2 larger, deeper troughs where the sandbar may bend further out away from the beach. And the water can be even deeper, 10 or 12 feet deep. And, it doesn't sound like a lot, but just that difference to these fish that are only used to, a foot or so of tidal difference on a day-to-day basis, the way that the waves break and dislodge their food items that they're waiting on, it's just a feeding zone for them because the waves grind up the bottom and deliver all this food to them. And all they have to do is sit on that backside of that sandbar. When the tide turns and starts coming in, they can just lay along the edge of that sandbar and wait for the food to be brought to them. And if you can cast your line in that zone, you can just really mop up. So typically I'll approach it with like 3 or 4 rods if it's not real busy, and I'll try to bait that many. And hopefully there's so many fish like today that I couldn't fish but with 1 rod. But typically you would set out 2 or 3 rods at least, and you might stagger the distance at first just to dial them in and see how deep they're running and which side of that pinch point that they might be on. And a lot of that depends on the wind and current. I like to start on the up current or upwind side and kind of concentrate on it. And typically my rods will be no more than 50 feet apart, because 40, 50 feet, something like that, 30 to 50 maybe. And because I want to be able to reach them fairly quickly, you'll
dang,
see a
so
bite.
you want some sprints out there. You wearing me out.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, well, if you watch some of, Ultimate Beach Bum, that it's little wonder that guy's so skinny the way he runs, at sprinting after those fish biting. When you get old and cranky like me, it's like, well, if I get him, I do, and if not, he'll just get bigger next time.
That's right.
But yeah, so I want those rods within a few steps. It's like I can sprint a short distance, but not like some young fellow like Bama Beach Bum does. No.
Well, that painted a good picture for me. I was just curious if it was worth to put all your eggs in one basket and move from one trough to the next. But it sounds like if you see a couple in a close proximity, to go ahead and get a rod in each one.
Yeah, it just kind of work that area thoroughly. And if you, after 20 minutes, if you haven't done any good, I'll reel the baits in and check them. And if nothing has molested them, then I'll just move on down to the next point, which may be 100 yards or it may be a quarter mile. Just depends on whatever the geography of the beach gives you. Another thing I try to do too is pay attention to any kind of, other structures that is like on the beach. If it's a point where the bottom slopes slowly, or if it's a bend where the beach may get wider, and that's usually one of those trough areas. And often when the tide starts coming in, the fish will start feeding on the reverse slope closer to the beach. And that's like a situation like today. That was when things turned on. I fished for 4 hours this morning without a bite, and the other fishermen I talked to had the same 0 luck. And I went and slurped some ghost shrimp and came back to the same location and walked up on 2 guys that were on the other side of the area I was fishing, and they were bowed up on pompano, and I got in on the action on the other side of the point from them.
That was my next question. I guess ghost shrimp was the magic bait.
And,
what about water clarity over there? I know you mentioned it's 65 or so. What's the water clarity like on that east side?
It's been good. Gulf Shores, Orange Beach. I'm not sure how far down Fort Morgan the water's been clear, but I would suspect pretty good ways with this northeast to east wind. Now, when we get these fronts bearing down on us and the wind picks up like 15 to 20, 25 or more, and if the seas get up to like 6 or 8 feet, it'll gingy things up. But a couple of days of north wind makes the surf flat, and there's not near as much biological stuff going on. So you don't have algae blooms and stuff like that as much to deal with this time of year. So once the waves die down, usually the Gulf clears pretty quickly along the beaches. So by the time a few days before the next front, and the sky may still be pretty clear, and you'll have opportunities to fish clear water and get a good look at what the bottom geography is and pick those places out where you'd want to check out. So I do a little scouting and stuff like that, even using the beach cams and stuff like that to scout places out, because I don't live on the beach. So I'll try to use those to at least kind of get an idea of what, how the tide has been affecting the sandbars and stuff like that.
That's a good tip in itself right there, Dan.
Yeah, it is. I was thinking the same thing. That's a great idea.
Yeah, any kind of recon you can do on the beach is gonna help
saves
you
time. Yeah.
Yeah, and if nothing else, just talking to other fishermen and eliminating empty water can be just as important as finding where they're biting.
Yeah,
So
we talk about it all the time on inshore, eliminating water, period. For sure. So I'm looking forward to getting this onshore tip from you. This week's onshore tip is brought to us by Fishbites. Are you tired of scrambling for bait whenever you decide to go fishing? Have an artificial bait that's better than live bait, ready to go at a moment's notice with Fishbites. It's easy to pack and travel with, and is shelf stable, and not to mention tough. With Fishbites, the bait stays on the hook and the fish stay on the bait. Check out the full line of scented saltwater and freshwater baits, as well as tackle, at fishbites.com. What you think for a tip this week, Cap?
Yeah, our sponsor, Fishbites, falls right into my tip, and that is the cooler water presents a situation to where the typical blue pack Fishbites, the long-lasting that everybody's pretty much used to, doesn't break down as quickly in this cool water. Plus, I think the fish themselves with a slower metabolism, they don't process odors as well. It's like, in fact, I even researched that cooler water doesn't disseminate odors as well as warmer water does. So, the fisherman has a lot of things kind of working against him. So, but fortunately, Fishbites makes a fast-acting formula. And today I was using the green shrimp, and it seemed to, even though it was, the water was nice and green and clear, the green, that lime green seemed to kind of stand out, and the fish would attack it, especially on those double hook pompano rigs and with the floats on them. And so I'd put a couple of strips of that Fishbites on there, and that's what I was using on my long rod, because I'm making long, hard casts, and I'm, inclined to throw my organic bait off, but that Fishbites stays on pretty good. And they would gnaw it off after 15, 20 minutes, but it still lasts a pretty good long time. And I actually caught a double on pompano on that, the green shrimp fast acting today, and took a picture of that I'll post on the page. Yeah, it was pretty neat, and it just goes to show that it doesn't have to be the typical shrimp kind of stuff. Now, I've actually had a little better luck with ghost shrimp, as far as like getting the bite going. And often what I'll do, so that especially if I've got a limited supply of ghost shrimp, or they're frozen or something like that, I'll kind of bait and switch with the fish, and I'll use the ghost shrimp, and then I'll have the next rod baited up and throw out a shrimp in the same spot after I get a bite. And today that's what was going on. After very quickly, when I walked up on the fish midday, you couldn't fish but one rod at a time. But while I was waiting for a bite, I would get the next rod ready. I would go ahead and bait my rig, and it's sitting there in the rod holder next to my other rod that I'm waiting for a bite on. And after a few minutes, if I don't get a bite, I go ahead and throw the one out that I've got ready, and then I'll reel in the other one and check it. That way I've always got a bait in the water, just in case a fish comes into that zone. And, because it's hard to tell, especially when the wind gets to blowing and it's a little choppy. Even an experienced fisherman may not detect a bite. Sometimes they'll grab that bait and they'll move in on it. Sometimes they just don't hit it hard, or maybe it's smaller fish that kind of peck it away. There's a lot of small, like 8 to 10 inch pompano in the surf zone right now in Gulf Shores, Orange Beach area, and over into the Panhandle as well. So, you have to kind of cull through them. I guess a lot like an inshore fisherman would cull through small specks to, get a nice slot limit, and it's the same way with pompano. And then you have these occasional other goodies that come by. I caught nice 16-inch whiting, and it didn't seem to matter after I got the fish biting whether I was using whichever bait I was using, whether it seemed like that if it slowed down, I'd go back to ghost shrimp. And then when it was really fast, I could go to an artificial like the jig or to the Fishbites. And I did want to give a shout out to my buddy Robin Martin in Orange Beach today. He caught a beautiful pompano, just over 3 pounds, on a jig, which is pretty unusual this time of year. He was jigging the area. Yeah, it really is. It was a nice 17-inch pompano, and we took some pictures. And before he released it, I weighed it for him on my hand scale. And on my digital hand scale, and it was 3.04, and it swam off strong, so I was really proud for him. And he said that was his personal best. So, there's some good pompano in the surf zone right now. Not tons of them. It's the old adage about, 90% of the fish are in 10% of the water. I would narrow it down even more and say maybe 95% of the fish are in 5% of the water. It's those when you find those areas that produce, and you give them what they're looking for, the natural baits, and then supplement that with the artificial bait strips like Fishbites, and then with the regular shrimp as well. Especially, the fresher the better. And another thing I was going to add on my tip, especially with the ghost shrimp, is that you've got to have a product, something, a piece of pantyhose or some kind of cheesecloth or something. And this product called Miracle Thread is great too. And it's an thin elastic string, and you tie it on the hook, just either tie it onto the hook itself or the eye of the hook or just above the hook, and just a couple of half hitches so that it doesn't come loose. And then you about 3 inches on either side of the knot. And after you put that ghost shrimp on there, you can wrap it 3 or 4 times and it'll stay on the hook during the cast.
It's a great tip.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And that's a catfish thing. The cat fishermen would use it to put chicken livers on a hook. There's some other mesh products that they make for like holding salmon eggs together or something like that. And so, there's several products out there that are useful, and they have several applications in salt water as well. Especially if you're using these soft baits that the fish seem to respond to better in this cool water. So it was worth it to me to go spend an hour and a half slurping up some ghost shrimp, and I had plenty to fish with today, and I've got some to take home and put in the freezer for next time. So
yeah, it sounds like it paid off for you.
I covered my bases. Oh yeah. Put together a good mess of fish, and when the tide came in, everything came together for a fun afternoon. So
good deal.
Sounds like a good day, David.
That's right. That's a great report.
Yeah.
We appreciate you as always keeping us informed, Mr. David, and we'll look forward to talking with you next time as always.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, but it seems like a lot going on for early January. So hope everybody gets a chance to get out and enjoy it. Yeah, it's still some good fishing out there, thank goodness.
All right, Captain Patric, it's always good to hear from the old Pier pounder. Mr. David's a wealth of knowledge. He'll talk your ear off, but he's got some good stuff to say.
A wealth of knowledge, though.
That's right, no doubt. Love Mr. David. You can't replace that guy. Well, we look forward to the inshore report. Captain Patric Garmeson is going to give it to us, and Joe Baya is joining us for a little while. He's going to get the inshore report with us and
hey, Cap.
Throw in some useless banter, I'm sure.
I was wondering who that guy was down there. I didn't recognize him.
I'm just here for the comments.
That's right, and he's going to do the offshore report with us with Captain Kendall as well. So welcome aboard, Joe. Good to see you.
You guys as well. Happy New Year to you fellas over there.
Man. I can't believe it's 2021. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm ready for it. Let's put that other year behind us.
It's got to get a little bit better. I'm just worried it's not going to get that much better, but we won't talk about that. We're talking about fishing today.
Yep, all fishing.
All right, Captain Patric. Well, run us through it, man. I know you've been fishing a ton for it to be January 6th or 7th. Just kind of run us through what you've been doing and what the pattern you're seeing, and just walk us through it, Cap.
So sheephead, speckled trout, and a little bit of redfish. Haven't really ran across many redfish in the last week or two, but the sheephead and the speckled trout have been pretty much my main targets. Going slick lure almost exclusively on the trout, throwing a little bit of swim bait The Betts Halo Shad caught us some fish recently, but the slick lure and the little slick have been absolute money on the trout. And then just if anytime I've got a family or maybe some novice anglers, or I know I'm going to have some pretty conditions to be able to get out in the bay and target some sheephead, I like to try to hunt down some shrimp and try to have those guys in the live well on the boat. And a lot of times, like right now, I'm not having to, like I still have shrimp in the boat right now that have been in there since Friday. And so if we wanted to sheephead fish today, we had that option. Anyway, what you got, Joe? I see you raise your hand.
Man, I have a question, Captain Patrick. Can I ask one?
Pick me.
With sheep's head, it seems like every year, it used to be like, oh yeah, man, March.
I was just thinking that's not something that I think about this time of year. And then it's like
February. Now here we are, first of the year, and you're talking about sheep's head. Are they stacking up in the bay like what they do in the late winter, early spring, or is this more just kind of spotty?
As far as are they stacking up, the answer is yes. It's not everywhere, but I've pretty much been following the sheephead from the Causeway area back in early November, and I'm just kind of slowly progressing down the bay with them. We went all the way out into the Gulf probably 10 days ago, and the only place I found them was out at the lighthouse. There was only a few fish there. We checked a couple of the rigs, and we didn't have any success out in the Gulf that particular trip. Not to say that there weren't any fish there, but we didn't see a lot of sign of them. So I've been doing all my damage in the bay. It's been like I said, if I have some nice live shrimp, then that's been the key to it. Using my typical split shot with 1/0 Kail hook and either fluorocarbon or monofilament 20-pound test, and that's been my target. A lot of the fish are down on the bottom or very close to the bottom, so I'm going to go to a piece of structure and I'm going to go over it very slowly with my trolling motor or my big motor and just stare at my fish finder, staring at the side vision and down vision on that Ray Marine. I'm not going to stop and fish until I see the fish on the screen.
Any particular structure they're holding on?
Concrete. I'm finding some around some metal structure. Not as much around wood structure as I would expect, but rocks, concrete, and metal structures have been the most productive for me.
I'd like to talk about Speckled Trout a little bit. You were talking about a swim bait. I know we talked about that a little bit with Veche and things like that. How do you fish that, and what applications?
I'm going to use that in areas where where the fish have either presented themselves, where we're catching them on slick lures, where we know that they're not on the bottom, and it's really just a chunk and wind application. You just throw it out as far as you can, keep the rod tip down, slowly work it, maybe throw a little rod twitch here or there just to give that bait a little bit of a wiggle or some way where the nose comes up or down, and but just slow and steady. It's anywhere from a novice to an expert bait. You can make it as complicated as you want, but you can really make it as simple as you want. Cooper caught him. I took him fishing I think it was last weekend. He caught a few on the swim bait, and then he ended up throwing the slick lure and having better success on the slick. But the swim bait did give him some confidence to just start hooking some fish and catching some fish. It was a really good win for us when I had him on the boat the other day. What you got, Joe?
Let's make it complicated. So
why wouldn't we?
No way.
Yeah. So all right. I'm just envision throwing these swim baits. Of course, I'm not going to catch anything on it. First cast, I throw it out. I reel it back in. Don't catch anything. Are you then trying to make your second cast? Are you more thinking like fan cast area, or would you let that bait descend in the water column and try to retrieve it back? Are you trying to work depth with that swim bait? Does that matter at all?
Well, most of the time I'm throwing this lure, I'm going to be in 6 foot of water or less.
Okay.
And then there are some times that we have seen some fish lately where we're in 10 feet of water and they're up in that, say, 0 to 4 foot range coming from the top down, and the swim bait will work there as well. So what you can do if you are in deeper water, say 6 feet and deeper, you can throw it out, give it a count, let it go all the way to the bottom, and then swim it back. That way that bait's going to come up at an angle. You're going to cover that water column from the bottom all the way to the top. It'll be up near the surface probably about halfway through your cast, but at least that first half of the cast, you're slowly covering that water from say in a scenario where you're 10 feet deep, it's going to go from 10 feet deep and slowly ascend to probably about 3 or 4 feet deep, depending on retrieve speed. But that would be kind of an ideal situation. And then the second half of your cast is going to pretty much maintain a certain depth at maybe 3 or 4 feet deep. If you're getting your bites on that second half of that cast way more than the first part of the cast, then you know that when it lands in the water, just go ahead and start retrieving it.
They're in that top water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point.
But if you're getting your bites at the very end of your cast, then you know you're deep and you got to really slow it down.
Or put on the little slick maybe.
Or maybe fish something totally different because it may not be the right application.
I'm thinking about these tidal rivers this time of year, and in a lot of these tidal rivers, you've got an area like you're talking about where you've got this 6 foot, 4 to 6 foot flat, depending on what the tide's doing. But then there's a drop off, and it'll drop off into that deeper river channel. You just kind of envision one of these points where there's this drop off. And when you're setting up to fish an area that's like I described, where you have a flat and you also have a drop off, if you're setting up to fish that area with a swim bait, where would you want to put your boat? I mean, would you want to put your boat in the deeper water and throw into that shallower water and work across that drop off? Give me an idea how you go about setting up and fishing up whatever kind of areas you're fishing right now that fish are orienting on.
So I would say, and Mr. David actually talked about this a little bit, was actually, are you going to cast deeper to shallower, and how are the fish going to go from shallow to deep as the tide's coming in, or deep to shallow? Well, a lot of times what I see is a lot what Mr. David was saying is going as the tide's coming in, the fish are moving from shallow or from deep going shallower. And you've got two things happening there. In the wintertime, our tides are usually lowest in the towards the morning, coming in as the day warms, as the day increases, and the water is probably going to increase in water temperature. So not only is the flat, whether it be in 4 feet deep or 2 feet deep, the flat is filling up slowly. So it gives more water for the fish to be under or be within. And then also that flat is warming up.
That's
so
right.
As that tide is coming in, I'm going to stay deep and cast shallow, bringing it back out towards the deeper water. And in most cases, I'm going to continue to use that method. But if you feel like you're around fish and you're not getting bit, then it could be that you're not presenting your bait in the right direction. So you may want to reposition in shallow and throw deep and bring it back into shallow. And those fish may be oriented on that ledge. And as the bait is, as it would look as if it's fleeing onto the flat, the fish would strike it as that bait reaches that ledge. Here this week in particular, I found some fish. They were probably in 18 inches of water. I was landing my lure in about a foot of water, and I was swimming it out. And right when it would get, we're probably talking a 6-inch drop. But when it got to that zone, coming shallow into the deeper water, they were clobbering it like almost every cast. And that was a situation where I feel like those fish were kind of staging on that ledge until that water got a little bit higher. Then they were going to probably jump up and get even shallower. But they needed a little bit more water to come in with that tide.
Great stuff, man.
It is. That's great stuff. I'm sitting here envisioning it. I know I've said it before. I've got to put that in my arsenal. I just never think of it. I'm always throwing top water or slick lure.
Man, these guys over here in Pensacola, they're actually fishing at night for these big giant trout, exclusively with swim baits. Most of them are doing it from a kayak. I'm like, right now, kayak fishing is cold, and they're catching these giant trout on these swim baits at night. No, not fishing lights. They're fishing points and that kind of thing. It's crazy stuff. I mean, there's more than one way to skin a cat, isn't there?
Yeah. It certainly is. It certainly is. And then, but like I said, with the my bait choices have really been very specific to big slick, little slick, swim bait, and the occasional hard bait. But man, I really am getting anti-treble hook to where I like that single hook from those soft plastic swim baits and slick lures.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to protect the fish if you're just wanting to go out and have fun and catch and release fish, or catch and tag fish, which is what I do a lot of times on my free time, as I'm strictly tagging. That single hook is going to be just one entry in, one entry out. And if
much nicer to the fish.
Yeah, a lot easier for the fish to recover from that.
Are you wasting your time this time of year using a popping cork?
Not so much, but I'm not seeing when we do play around with a popping cork, I'm not finding that we're doing real well on size. They're really small fish that are seeming to be, that'll key in on a whether it be a live shrimp, a voodoo shrimp, or any type of shrimp imitation. It just doesn't seem to draw a nicer fish. Any type of fin fish imitation seems to draw your much better bites. I
was just curious when you see them up, when you find them up shallow like that, if that'd be a good option or not.
Man, I really, looking back on that bite that I found where they were in such shallow water, I'm wondering, I was thinking back after I left that bite, I'm like, man, I wonder if they would have hit a top water. Like if I could have thrown like a really small, like a spook junior or something like that, something subtle, and bring it off of that shallow if they would have been hitting it. Didn't try it. The slick lure was hammering them away, so I was just
hard to get away from that when it's on.
Shining. Yeah,
for sure. All right, y'all ready for the Hey Cap question?
Yeah, man.
This week's Hey Cap question is brought to us by Daycool Heating and Air. As the saying goes, if you don't like the weather in South Alabama, wait 10 minutes because it's going to change. But one of the things that is very predictable is the pricing at Daycool Heating and Air. They offer flat rate pricing and they don't charge for after hours calls. Let's face it, your HVAC always seems to act up whenever you need it the most. Don't get stuck between a rock and a hot place. Daycool offers flat $45 service calls, $59 tune-ups, and they offer free estimates on equipment replacement. The pros at Daycool have been servicing Mobile and Baldwin counties for over a decade. Contact them at 251-633-5121 or check them out online at www.daycoolair.com or on the Daycool Heating and Air mobile app. They are license number AL07028. This week's Hey Cap comes from Nathan Wilson. Nathan Wilson says, Hey Cap, do you think it helps to use a fish scent on artificial baits? If so, which one do you find to be the most productive? Spray, gel, and is it brand specific? Do you have a specific brand that you like to use? I like this question because I see it on Facebook quite a bit, and I've had people actually ask me a little bit about it. And is it specific to speckled trout, or is it more of a redfish kind of thing? Because I know they're more scent oriented. So I'm curious to get your answer on this. What you think, Cap?
Well, and he doesn't mention it, but Fishbites is a type of scented bait, and you have gulp baits that are a type of soft plastic but scented bait.
True. I was thinking more of a Procure or a gulp spray or something like that, but I guess you're right as well.
So what I have used is primarily like the gel from the Procure, and because it's nice and tacky and oily and it sticks to your lure that you're putting it on. And the fish bites on the shrimp flavored fish bite on a shrimp imitation like a voodoo shrimp is probably the most productive combination I've ever used. It seems to get that bait, it seems to get that fish a little bit more interested in it. But I don't find the need for scents as much in the wintertime, me personally, in the wintertime when the water's cold, as I do as it starts to warm back up into the spring. Like when it starts warming into the spring, I'll notice that I can go, I'll like in the wintertime, if I'm popping corking for redfish with a shrimp imitation, I feel like just a plain voodoo shrimp, anything that looks like a shrimp of any size, a redfish is going to key in on it because he's going to hear the sound, come over there, investigate, find the shrimp, and eat it. As it warms up a little bit more, it seems like that scent is going to travel through the water a little better and make them just kind of reassure that fish that, hey, I'm about to eat something that not only looks real, it smells real as well. But I can remember stories back when like when I was a kid, we would go and fish like Dog River in between the marinas. That was like a big spot that my dad would take us to go and fish, and we would go there. And I remember this one year that there was probably a dozen or so boats, and everybody was kind of catching fish, but the guys that were catching more fish had this secret spray, this secret
the secret juice.
Oh man, I don't even remember what it was, but it was something like Joe's shrimp spray or something like that. And
still got some.
And you would spray it.
Secret recipe.
That's right.
Spray it on the lure, and the guys that were catching all the speckled trout were using this scent spray, and everybody bought every can that Walmart and Academy or whoever sold it. They all bought it out. Was it a real thing, or was it a placebo effect? I don't know, but I will say that the guys that were using that spray were certainly having better results. And that was catching speckled trout in winter, possibly early spring conditions. In the long story of this is I don't so much am overly concerned about it right now, but as it does start to warm up, having something with a little bit of scent does seem to help out. Fishbites being the best type of scented bait, and then gulps work as well, like a curly tail or a shrimp type gulp. Those are always really effective on redfish as well. But man, speckled trout, I don't see them really needing a scented bait to really fire that bite up. It always seems like if you're presenting a bait in a way that they want to eat it, they're going to eat it whether it smells like plastic or smells like a shrimp.
Yep.
So,
I only have one thing to add to that, because I don't have much experience with the scented gels and sprays, but we went down to the West End one time, and we were kind of catching some reds in the surf with slick lures with Captain Richard, and we were filling up the belly of those slick lures, that Procure stink. And I mean, there was no doubt about it. It was on like Donkey Kong. It was no doubt that Procure helped a ton. I mean, 1 to 10 without it,
Well, and and that's a really cheap test.
For sure.
Joey, if you talk to Joey about his lure, he talks about why he put the slit in there. One was to kind of reduce how much rubber was there for the hook to penetrate, but also he wanted a spot for you to be able to just glob that Procure in there. He loves it. He loves it for trout, redfish, everything. So you think if you buy a bottle, so it's like a 2.5 ounce bottle, and you put a freaking dab of it on a slick lure, and it stays on there for 25 or 30 casts, right, or possibly even longer.
Pretty cheap insurance.
Why not give it a try? Just especially if you got a buddy on the boat that's like, oh man, I don't need no scents, and you want to try the scent, then and it works for you, then y'all worked as a team to figure out what was going on there.
You ever thought about how hard of a life it is for a fish? Like, can you imagine you just swimming along, and then, hey, that looks like a shrimp. And you go over there, that smells like a shrimp. And then wham, like Butch, what if I invited you over to my house and I was like, hey, Butch, you want a hamburger, and you were like, yeah, that looks like a good hamburger. And he's like, wow, I just punched you right in the face.
Unfortunate. What's even worse than that? Think about being the shrimp.
Right?
I do not want to be a shrimp in Mobile Bay. I can tell you that, Cat. What does not eat a shrimp?
Bunch of sick anglers out there.
I know it.
Mean to these fish.
That's a good question, though. That's a good question.
It was. We appreciate that, Nathan. Nathan's going to get a prize pack from the slick lure, and it's definitely slick season. We appreciate that question. Nathan, make sure you email us your shipping address at alabama@bestfishingreport.com to redeem your slick lures. You guys make sure you're following the Best Fishing Report Facebook page. Make sure you join the Northwest Florida Fishing Report private group in the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report private group to stay up to date on all those posts and slick lure package requests. All right, man, we're going to head on down and get the offshore report. You guys ready?
Ready.
Yeah, man. Let's
go
do
see
it.
what Captain Kendall's up to on the Gulf Rebel. All right, Captain Kendall, tell us a fish story, buddy. I know you guys have been getting offshore a good bit and have been offshore in the new year, 2021. So let's hear it, man. What's been going on? What'd you guys get into?
Yeah, we went out the other day, and we had a good trip. We had to work for them this time, but we got a late start, so we checked a few close rigs, headed out. We went by the Ram, and it seemed to be, as far as current, in some pretty warm water still, but it's got a weird cycle right now. A lot of those in that same area rigs are in some colder water, but around the Ram it was a lot fishier, a lot of grass, a lot of blackfin on the surface, and a lot of bait.
Did you guys find any yellowfin?
Yeah, we went out a little bit farther. We started off at the Ram, and it seemed to be fishy, but the curiosity got the best of us, so we didn't get to where we wanted to go, which is a little bit farther out. I think we left there a little earlier, now looking back on that trip. But we ended up shooting out another 30 miles, hitting some drill ships, bouncing around, and we ended up getting on a few of them about 3 a.m. In between 3 a.m. and about 5 o'clock, we ended up catching about 3.
How'd you guys catch them?
We caught them on the chunk, and we had a lot of blackfin on the jigging. We lost about 40 though. Lost about 40 blackfin to dolphin. They were tearing us up, So we could have had a pretty big haul if that wasn't the case. But that's just how fishing is. We didn't really get into the live bait. We had a big trap full of live bait, and an otter got into it and tore them all up. So we went empty on the live bait this time. So
it's always something for an offshore fisherman. It's always something for an offshore fisherman.
Live bait's the bane of your existence when you're trying to go offshore. It's just such a frustrating deal. You're talking about starting out at the Ram, Kendall.
Mm-hmm.
What made you start there? Was it a report, or did you see something good on the altimetry or the chlorophyll or the sea surface temps, or was that just the first one on your tour?
Yeah, we looked at the loop current. It was still in some warmer water, and it seemed to be fishier there. But how that happened is we got a late start, so we just kind of had to pick that to go with, just to get that kind of evening bite, right at dark, and just kind of hang out there. But it was probably the best looking rig out of all the spots as far as where the fish were. We were marking pretty deep, but we were marking, and like I said, right there before dark, it was a lot of bait running around, a lot of blackfin on the surface, and I think it would have had a pretty good bite at about, like I said, late. What I was hearing from other guys is the bite this past week has been at 3 a.m. Don't know why that is, but it sure came true for us later. But I think that rig would have probably been the best bite out of all of them if we would have stayed there. But like I said, the curiosity got the best of us. We were tag teaming with a couple other boats out there. I think another boat did good out there on Thunder Horse, if I'm not mistaken, way on down the road, but we weren't going that far. They found some down there. Another boat said they had a few jumping at the lump, but they got ate up by sharks. And I'm trying to think of what else. But yeah, I mean, all the other boat that we were talking to, they hit a lot of rigs on more of the east side, and they were just blank, marking deep, but they just weren't. The fish weren't biting. But what it's been here the past week or two, it's been a 3 a.m. bite, and like I said, it turned on at 3 o'clock. It turned on. They started jumping, and it was about a 2-hour bite, and then it shut off right at daylight.
Ken, are you talking about that blackfin bite? And blackfin, they're kind of a misunderstood tuna. I mean, if you take care of blackfin, if you do what you need to do with them,
that's fine.
It's just as good as yellowfin when it's fresh. And I mean,
iced well.
I've proven this on the boat cooking for folks. But that being said, it seems like with blackfin, some days it's the diamond jig, some days it's the butterfly jig, some days it doesn't matter. Did it matter much when you were jigging for those fish? Was one type of jig standing out over another for you?
I think we do good. We pour up 95% of our jigs, and I think what does best for us is the glow-in-the-dark jigs. Honestly, we all got their lights. We got these big, powerful lights, and every time they catch one, bring one up, they'll reload it as it flash that light on it, kind of heat it up, and it starts glowing.
That's cool.
I seem like it does the best, but I mean, it's a hit or miss thing. I mean, like I said, we have pink. Pink was doing good this last trip. Then every once in a while, like I said, the chrome. I don't think it really matters. I think you can have a few that you can mix in there. What I think matters the most to me is like the current and the heavier jigs versus a lighter jig. You know what I mean? So if the current's ripping or whatnot, I mean, you got to go to a heavier jig. So we always have some 12-ounce butterfly jigs that have some curve into it. Again, I think half the time they hit on the free fall. And so I like a nice curvature to my jigs. Like I said, it doesn't matter. I think it's just a preference there, but like a nice free fall jig and all that. But yeah, I don't think it matters too much on the type of jig, but chrome, a nice glow in the dark one, That's what we use the most, and it does pretty good.
I like
We're
that.
experimenting though. We got a couple different stuff.
Yeah, you're talking about them hitting on the free fall too. I think that's the number one biggest mistake I see people make is they don't take that little plastic sleeve off the point of the hook.
Yeah.
You see them, they'll like hook a black fin and then it comes off and they're like, dang it, and they walk over there and say, hey man, let's try this.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's they don't fish the column on the way down. So talk to me about what you tell your anglers, when you're setting up on to start jigging for blackfin.
What's your school?
What your school is for your anglers?
I mean, I'd always tell them, be careful with the jig. Okay, that's a wrecking ball. You got everybody standing around you. You got your boat. Just be ready to go. I mean, when you're free falling it down there, make sure you're ready to stop the drag, because when they hit it on the way down, because we catch a lot of big yellowfin on the way down. Oh yeah. And they'll hit that jig and then they'll take off. And so be ready to stop and be able to be ready to reel on that fish. Some of our guys use electric reels. It depends if it's an older guy. We have some electric reels, so I can give them, hey, fish right here, marking at 175, 200. They can drop it right there at, that 220 mark and kind of break through them. I just say work the jig. You don't have to work it in the same spot. Just bounce it a couple times and then kind of work it through the column, hit it a couple times, agitate that thing. You got to get up close to the surface, just reel it on up, because I hate when people they keep jerking it. Next thing you know, it's coming out of the water, flying, hooking somebody or hitting the boat.
Well, that's why you leave that little plastic sleeve on. It protects everybody.
That's right.
I can't imagine that ever happening where somebody's not paying attention and would jank it into the boat.
Right.
Never happens. Especially not on a charter. Right.
Must just be the Gulf Rebel guys, I guess.
Yeah, probably.
That's right. Well, did you guys find any marlin sightings? Any stick nose?
Yeah, we actually hooked up on one. And again, it was probably a white marlin. It didn't look like it could have been a rat blue, but we actually hooked it on the chunk. And
really?
So we fought it for a while, and then it jumped off. Like I said, we weren't really shooting, prepared to catch one, honestly, and not looking to hook one up either, because we're, during that midst of jumping, that's the last thing. I mean, we're not trying to catch them. I mean, we don't mind catching them, but we're trying to catch them eating fish. But it fought for, a good 20, 25 minutes, jumped off. But we actually caught it on the chunk. So, but it was exciting to see at the time, because it was kind of a long, hard working nighttime shift for us. I mean, the way the fish were biting, because we struck out at 2 or 3 other spots earlier. And again, I don't even think we had but a handful of blackfin by the time we got to that last drill shift and started catching those blackfin, and then on top of that, you're losing 3 to every 1 to a dolphin, so it did break up the tension there and boost the morale.
Well, hey, Kendall, this is Captain Patric. We've had several different offshore contributors, and at some point in time, everybody talks about chunking, but everybody has their own little twist of what they do, maybe hook size, hook placement, bait of choice. Give me a little rundown on your
styrofoam coffee cups.
Yeah,
right.
It's a tough, because I got some deckhands that prefer a certain way, and to me, I just tell them I don't care. Just somebody do something, somebody do the other thing, a little salt and pepper, and then because I've seen the work both of their ways. But some like the skin on, and some like the skin off. A nice big chunk right there in the red. We try to use the fresh. We'll bring out bonita and start with that. Anytime we get our hands on a fresh blackfin, we'll cut it up and sacrifice. Yeah, again, preference thing. Some people like to use long leaders, and some people like to use no leaders. And again, it's one of those things that, to me, I'm like, hey, do one of each.
As long as it works.
We've caught fish on, right. We've caught fish on both. So to me, it doesn't matter as much. And I think, another thing is you can do a weighted drop with the chunk, but you better have a double up on your leader length and then let it down nice and slow. You can do that. I'm not a big fan of that. I like the natural flow of falling. When we run our chum line, we like to bust out some chum line. Just make sure you don't throw the whole carcass over, because sometimes that will stir up something you don't want to see.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then size hook, I like the bigger size hooks. I use an owner 7, 8, 9 size. So, I don't want one too small, but I want one nice size. And to me, I hook it through, pull it all the way like you're sewing, and then hook it in just hide that hook a little bit, better.
You using fluorocarbon for your leaders?
Yeah. Most likely so, yes.
It seemed like,
if you use a leader.
Right.
It seemed like in the wintertime, a lot of times, or even in the early spring, as we were fishing, you were getting out there. There weren't nearly as many people fishing. Now, this day and age, that may not be the case, but it seemed like you could get away with a little bit heavier leader earlier in the year. You didn't have to mix it up as much. I mean, we'd have trips where we just caught everything on the chunk, and then whereas into the summer we were having to chunk and troll and kite and popper and
sure,
all that. And so, are you seeing that out there right now? Like, what kind of leader material were you able to get away with on this trip?
It's 80 pound, I think is what we've been, as like our standard 80 pound, but we do have the 100 and we do have a 60, but I think, the 80 works great. You can get away with 60.
It's tough to wire 60.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. 80 is probably I probably won't, I like to just stick with that. I think that works the best, that 80 for me. You could go higher. I don't see why not. It just depends on the length of your leader. If it's, if you have a short leader, you can kind of shy them away, I think, versus a longer leader, have a little bit more flow, a little bit naps, depending on if you're live baiting or chooking. Yeah, I'd stick with that 80 for sure.
Kendall, you talked about the lump. Of course, we know we're going to see a big push of fish over there as we finish the winter. One of the other things they catch over there is some absolutely giant wahoo. Will you see a push of wahoo on these floaters like the Ram Powell and the Marlin and the Beer Cannon, those rigs that are closest to the guys listening to this show? Will you see a push like that this time of year?
This time of year, yeah, I would say so. We caught one about southeast of there for about 15 miles, so close to about 65 miles out from our pass. We hooked up on a nice, I think it was 41 and a half pounds.
Nice.
Yeah, that was spoiled us because anybody was watching it at the time. But
you guys fast trolling in?
But, yeah, we were fast trolling in, so we hooked up on there. I think you'll start to see it get kind of shaky this wind in the springtime. You get a lot of rain, you get a lot of snow melting, and all these rivers start flooding out and kind of messing up the dirtiness of that water. You get a lot of mud. I think that will kind of start pushing them out, depending on how much it's raging, but it'll push them out farther offshore. You'll get some here and there trapped in, but we caught one, so you can't catch them unless you're pulling. So
that's right.
Just put them out. Put them out.
For sure. That's an awesome report, man. We appreciate it. And that's going to bring us to our offshore tip. This week's offshore tip is brought to us by Advanced Transmission in Spanish Fort. Give the professionals a call who have been trusted on the Gulf Coast for over 25 years at 251-626-6061 or check them out online at www.advanced-transmission.com. What you think for an offshore tip this week, Captain Kendall?
I have a pretty simple one here. Like I said, we build a lot of our lures and our diamond jigs, but I know a lot of people can't and don't have the tools to do that. When you buy a store-bought diamond jig, just go ahead and buy some stinger hooks and add one to the top. I think I guarantee you'll catch a lot more fish if you do that. Just instead of banking on that standard treble hook at the bottom with that split ring. Sometimes I've lost many fish due to that hook breaking, that split ring breaking off. So again, I just make sure every time, if we do buy some, we actually just take them off. We take them off and go ahead and put a stinger hook at the top, and you can put one at the bottom too, as long as it depends on the size of the stinger hook you use to make sure they don't hook together. We favorite the one stinger hook at the top, and we wear them out. So my tip of this is, if you buy some diamond jigs, go ahead and get you a pack of stinger hooks, throw one on the top. Some people debate on that stinger hook at the top. It might rub your knot or something like that. I haven't personally had any problems with catch. I've caught some big yellowfin on the jigs, and I haven't had a problem, losing one being tied up there by the knot. But if you do catch a few of them, just go ahead. You just got to check your leader, and it's okay to, catch. Right. It's okay to retie it after a couple fish. Just make sure you're checking it. I think that's a really underdog tip there for everybody out there.
Oh, I love that.
Those are my favorite kind of tips. Yep.
Yeah, because that's what I love about it is how many times have we used a diamond jig and I've never done that. I've never even seen that done. Mm-hmm. You were talking about putting that stinger hook up on top. Makes me also think, like, is it worthwhile to put I don't even know what they call it, but like on a butterfly jig, you're not tying it to the jig. You're tying it to the ring.
The split ring, right.
on the jig so that your line is in line with the hook as opposed to pulling on the jig, pulling on the hook. Do you think it'd be worth it to do that on a diamond jig, or are you still are you able to get away with tying it straight to the jig?
I mean, we've gotten away with it tying it straight to the jig. I guess it depends on the split ring, and it's been a while since you have to put one on. But I mean, if you got some good split rings, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to put one on. But I just know the store-bought ones, every time we have a few that we do use. But like I said, we just go ahead and take them off. I feel like when they hit that diamond jig, and here, another little thing I've noticed is when they do have it on the bottom, that we get a lot of hits, but we don't get a lot of set up hook on when it's at the bottom for certain. I don't know if they're just hitting that jig and they're just kind of hitting the jig and that hook at the bottom, they're missing it.
Well, and like on the butterfly jigs, it's not a split ring at the top. It's just a solid ring, that stinger hook is on. And so I don't even know I don't even know what that would be called, or if you could even buy them and how you would get it onto the. I don't even know that you could get it onto the jig, but so just stay away from the split rings is what I'm hearing. That's a cool tip, man.
Right.
I like
well,
that.
and you talk about, we all talk about, I know I've definitely seen it, most of the time the tuna hit it on the flutter down. So maybe that jig is, going straight down and they're hitting it from up, and that the hook on the top of the jig is actually the bottom. Whew, that's getting deep.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I fell asleep while you were talking about
top and bottom.
Oh gosh, that's a great tip, man.
But no,
that really is.
And like I was saying, you can add one. We use some top and bottom. And this depends on the size. If you have a little bit, I can't remember if it's smaller or bigger size hook, they have a little bit longer, or brand, they have a little bit longer string hanging off. So if you don't want your hooks hooking together, I've seen that done before. I just don't remember if it was a bigger finger hook or a little one that has the longer. But at the top, it just never fails. At the top of your jig, it never fails. I'll tell you that. I like
it, man.
So
that's a great tip.
That is a great tip, man. We appreciate the report. And if folks want to get up with you guys and book a trip, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
You got our Facebook page at Gulf Purple Charter, and you got Brian at 747 all sevens.
Awesome, Captain Kendall. We appreciate the report, and we look forward to talking to you next time. You guys be safe out there and keep whacking them.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
Man, that's an awesome offshore report there, Captain Patric and Joe. I guess Captain Joe. You're still a captain, aren't you?
Yeah.
He doesn't look like one, though.
Well, hey,
look at him. He doesn't have coon eyes or anything.
Look here, sir.
Look at him.
I earned my days on the water. I may not be I'm offended. I'm deeply offended, sir.
He's just an office captain now.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey,
very
it's all good.
Very office-like captain.
Hey, it's no hate. No hate. Whenever I asked Captain Kendall how to book a charter with it, made me think about you. I left you out after your report. I didn't even ask you how to book a charter with you. What's your bookings look like, man? I know you've been fishing a ton.
Yeah, so already knocked a few trips out for January. I think I've got a couple more already booked in January, but I'm booking February, March, April, May, I think possibly into June already.
Nice.
These are people that are looking ahead. They're looking at full moons. They're looking at tides. They're calling me saying, hey, I want to come down this time frame. What's going to be a good couple of 2 or 3 days for us to fish? And I'm lining them up. So they're going ahead and booking now. So they're going ahead and, I mean, we can't predict the weather, but we can certainly look at moon phases. And
you can do your best.
And
right.
Got to try to pick out something good.
It's always a good day when you're fishing with Captain Ugly, though, right?
Absolutely.
Always a good day. The guys today, they said that it was, they were like, well, is it ugly fishing or nasty fishing or what kind of fishing?
All of it.
Yeah, all of the above. Main thing is I just set the bar low. I try to sell low, low, deliver high, and everybody comes out. But then that way, if we do have a low delivery, we sold low too, so it all works out in the end. But
I saw a pretty cool video you posted today.
Yes, so the video I had was some of that. What I was talking about earlier in the show was that I found these fish in some super shallow water. They were in a foot, and actually the fish were about 18 inches. But anyway, that was a pretty sweet video I had there. But then today I had Chad Hoover, who's has a pretty big following on YouTube. Y'all want to check him out? He's gonna have a show coming up in the next couple of days that'll recap what we did. And for those of you who don't know who Chad Hoover is, he's also started the kayak saltwater series, and it's the first dedicated kayak catch photo release redfish series that will ultimately turn into a slam series and multiple species. There's multiple membership levels, including a free one, and
that's
it's
cool.
It's all through Fishing Chaos. Anyway, anybody that's an avid kayak fisherman, I would encourage them to go check that out. I think it's pretty.
What's his YouTube channel?
Entry. It's Chad Hoover. Chad Hoover is the name, but it's kayak bass fishing.
Nice.
And
I have heard of him actually.
Obviously, this show we won't be kayak fishing. We were on the Blue Wave.
Right.
We need to get him over to the Alabama Freshwater Fishing Report.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Mm-hmm. We'll get him set up. He's a talker, man. He likes to talk. So
I know some people like that.
You're gonna have to clear the.
I don't know anybody that likes to talk around here.
You'll have to clear some time for him. But yeah, he's a wealth of knowledge. Super passionate about what he does, about getting anglers out there kayaking, competing against one another. Good fair competition, and with the combination of him working with Fishing Chaos is doing everything that they can do to make the competition as fair and equal as possible. Just make it a very fun challenge. Yep. So anybody out there kayak fishing, I would encourage y'all to go check that out.
Awesome, man. Well, folks want to book a trip for you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Give me a shout. You can call me or text me at 251-747-1554, or you can go to the web and go to uglyfishing.com, click the book now button, and you'll be able to see my calendar, check your dates. If you need some help with looking at some, what are some optimal times? I mean, some people will say, well, what's optimal time for sheephead fishing? I've already booked some sheephead trips. Weather does play a huge factor in those time of the year, but moon phase does help with kind of lining up some of the bigger fish. If we want to try to target our big one and maybe contest my state record, then let's do it.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. We got to do What Did You Learn? This week is brought to us by Test Calibration. Is your diesel engine showing signs of low pressure or excessive engine smoke? If so, you may be in need of a repair to your diesel fuel injection system. Test Calibration has been selling and servicing diesel turbochargers and fuel injection systems since 1976 and are up to date with all the latest diesel technology. No matter if you're running a diesel in your boat, tractor, or truck, Test Calibration can help you. Contact them at 800-822-0057 or visit them online at testcalibratindieselandturbo.com. And also brought to us by Hilton's Offshore Charts, bringing you the highest quality online satellite fishing chart since 2004. Your source for sea temps, altimetry, currents, and watercolor at hiltonsoffshore.com. All right, Patrick, what'd you learn this week, man?
I like David's point to the fact that the fish were really responsive in those cuts and the pinch points, but not only that, but on the fact that
and focusing on those, put all your effort into that right there.
Putting that as a big focus, but then also the fact that the tide coming in, making the bar, putting more water on top of those bars and moving those fish up onto the bars in shallower areas. I just got done talking about it on the inshore world and how important it is. And I don't think about that when I'm going to the beach. Joe and I were just talking that usually beach fishing for me is cast it out, stick it in a rod holder, and drink a beer.
Right.
But if I want to be better at it.
I didn't say that. I am always a student. I am a student of all fisheries.
Always very aware of what I'm doing.
He is way different on the air versus off the air.
Right. It's not what we just heard.
But yeah, I
agree with you.
I think that was a really cool point that David brought up. So what about you, Joe?
Well, I don't want to give you the big head, but it was something you said. You're talking about that swim bait fishing. The thing I really took away from what you were saying, I just never would have thought of this, but if you're getting bid as soon as you land, then your fish are up shallower. If you're getting bit as soon as you start working the bait after you let it sink, your fish are going to be deeper. If you're getting bit
or
closer to the boat as you're reeling it in, then the fish are going to be shallower. I just thought that was a really smart way to look at it to help you pinpoint where the fish are in the column.
Yeah, and if you need to change up, like we were talking about earlier, if you need to change to a little slick, if you're getting bit every time, as soon as you let it all the way sink to the bottom and you start reeling, change to a little slick or even a bigger slick up top. But I guess if it's working on a swim bait, then you don't have to do that. But you get my point.
I like
That's right.
Yeah.
What about you, Butchie boy?
Man, I really like the top, putting a split ring on the top of the diamond jig and or glow in the dark jig and jigging it that way.
Or a stinger
Kendall.
hook, not a split ring.
Yeah, we're putting a stinger hook on the split ring, right?
I think he was saying he took the split ring completely off because they were having them break.
And then doing like one of those little rope stinger hooks on it?
Yeah, like what you would see on the butterfly jig. So that you're just doing like a girth hitch on the actual jig.
Sure, putting it up top.
So apparently you didn't learn what he said.
Well, now I did. I liked it anyways, and now I like it even better.
Now we got some.
I'd never had a problem with those split rings breaking, so I would never thought of that. But yeah, that's how I took it anyway. Maybe we need to have him back on and get clarification.
I'll be looking forward to listening to this tomorrow to see who's right. I'm sure it's
right.
Well, and if you think about it, on the flutter down, the top hook is really the bottom hook because it's going straight down. That's why you get all the bites on the way down.
I don't know about that. Is it? You think because
maybe
you think it flips in the water? I don't think it flips in the water. Yeah, the top hook is the bottom hook for sure.
This jig, I don't know. I'm not much in the offshore world. This jig y'all are talking about sounds absolutely ridiculous to me. So.
Well, it's kind of like understanding altimetry, right? We had this conversation a while back.
Yeah, I have to show you
Go back to that show, Patrick. Once you understand altimetry, you can understand what me and Butch are talking. We're a little bit above you.
Oh, I understand.
I
forgot you are Captain.
Keep listening you just keep listening to the show, and
you'll learn something eventually.
You'll gradually start to absorb these things. And
most of the time it takes me listening to the show about 6 or 7 times before it really fully sinks in. But
this is what we're talking about, Captain Patrick. Look, here's a butterfly jig. This is a diamond jig kind of shape right here. That's what we're talking about the glow in the dark. This is the bottom hook, and this is what he's talking about, putting the top hook on the top here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a great podcast, by the way, because everybody can't see anything.
Well, but people get that I'm looking at something. So. All right, guys. Joe, we appreciate it as always, man. We appreciate you being on here. That's going to wrap it up. You guys, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like us to email the podcast each week, just text the word fishing to 314-665-1767. Again, just text the word fishing to 314-665-1767 to subscribe to our email list, and you guys get the new show each week. You guys stay tuned next week for the new Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report. You guys keep whacking them. We enjoyed it. This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report is brought to you by Dixie Supply and Baker Metalworks are proud to be your metal roofing headquarters for over 40 years. Save time and money by buying from the most reliable manufacturer on the Gulf Coast. Buy it today, pick it up today. With the addition of their new store in Cantonment, Florida, they now have 8 locations to serve you. Dixie Supply and Baker Metalworks, your metal roofing headquarters.
And also KillerDock. Are you suffering from dock dysfunction? Check out a full line of dock enhancement at KillerDock.com. That's KillerDock.com.
Also brought to you by Coastal Conservation Association of Alabama. Check them out at CCAAlabama.org.
This week's Saltwater Fishing Report is brought to you by Angelo Depaola, the Coastal Connection with eXp Realty, your boating and beach property specialist. Check me out on Facebook at Angelo Depaola Realtor, the Coastal Connection, or call me direct at 850-287-3440.
Also brought to you by Foster Contracting, Fortified Roofing Pros. Did you know you could save up to 40% on your homeowner's insurance with a fortified roof? Learn more at fortifiedroofingpros.com or call them at 251-973-9999.
This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report was brought to you by me, Joe Baya, and National Land Realty. If I can help you in any way with the purchase or sale of land in Alabama or Florida, whether it's timberland, farmland, recreational land like hunting land, or even agricultural land or ranch land like horse farm, drop me a message at jbaya@nationalland.com. That's JBAYA at nationalland.com.
This week's episode of Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report is brought to you by me, Captain Patric Garmeson and Ugly Fishing. You can shoot me a text or give me a call at 251-747-1554, or you can find us on the internet at www.uglyfishing.com.